My friends have been saying that I look like an Arab Pablo Escobar with my hair like this. I don't see it. What's up? It's Mustafa, second year medical student, and today I'll be talking about how I use my iPad and why I use my iPad during med school. This is something people have been asking me recently, so I thought I'd make a video about it. So let's get to it. Roll the intro. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that intro. I don't know. I just thought it would be cool to make a little intro for my videos. Let's start off. Everyone loves a well-structured video, so let's split this video into why I use an iPad, what I use, and how I use it. First and foremost, let's track back to what I used before I used an iPad. What I used to do is that I used to print off my lecture slides and I'd bring them to class so that way I can annotate them. And then later on when I went home, I would rewrite my notes in notebooks or binders full of papers using thousands of different color pencils, pens, erasers, sharpeners, etc. All that you can think of. And of course, like everyone else, I used to have stacks of binders for each subject when I was in undergrad, and I used to carry them around with me all the time in my backpack. Of course, like everyone else who has been through this, I ended up getting back pains from carrying everything in my backpack. My binders, my lecture slides, the pens and pencils, and even, the textbooks, the massive textbooks. Not only was the back problem an issue, even though that was the most physical one, I had issues with the fact that everything was hard copy. So if I forgot my notes at home and I went to the library and tried to study a subject and I forgot a notebook where I had all my notes in it, I would have to go back home, and then once I get back home, I lose that motivation to even study or go back to the library, and at that point it's a day wasted. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the idea here. You lose that convenience that you get with, let's say, a laptop or an iPad. And one last thing with using notes and binders and papers is that if you lost your notes, that's it, they're gone. But you don't want to risk that day before your exam. And then you have to message your friends, you got to ask them for notes, and it's just a big hassle, which has happened to me many times. Sorry, Lisa. Okay, so then why don't I use a laptop? I did. I transitioned to typing out my notes. The one really good thing about having a laptop is that I was able to condense everything into one spot. I used to have all my notes, I would have all my lecture slides in there, I would have all my textbooks and PDFs. Everything goes in one laptop, and I put that in my backpack, and I did not have that physical problem anymore. Even with the issue of losing notes, I had everything backed up to OneDrive, which is a cloud drive, and was also backed up on the app OneNote. The problem that comes with using a laptop is that I have found, me personally, that I would be typing out novels during class. And I mean paragraphs and paragraphs, transcribing word for word what the lecturer was telling us in class. And the problem with this is that when I get in that mode where I'm typing every single word that the lecturer is teaching us, I have a problem with focusing in class because I tend to zone out and I would just go in and type in everything that they say. And then once I come out of class, I took nothing from it. This is where I had the disadvantage of not having my lecture slides printed off so that way I can just easily annotate them and take the time to listen to what the lecturer is actually saying and take in what is being learned, and then make little notes here and there when I annotate, and maybe write in some questions and such, and etc. and etc. Now when it came down to rewriting my notes, that is a whole big problem too, because I have a big thing for rewriting everything by hand. And that helped me learn a lot when I was in undergrad as well as now in med school. But typing out everything on the laptop made me feel like I wasn't learning everything that I was typing out. And I also didn't have the capabilities of manipulating images, annotating certain things on the slides, or making charts that I was able to do normally in my notepads. I mean, I could, but to a certain extent, it took some time on the laptop. So this is where I decided that maybe if I was able to combine the perks of the laptop and the perks of using a notepad and handwriting my notes into one thing, that would be using the iPad. It has also been shown research-wise that handwriting your notes retains better than typing out your notes. With the iPad, I have the perk of handwriting my notes, as well as having my lecture slides on the PDF that I can use to annotate, and then later on when I want to rewrite my notes, I could go on and open an empty slide and then handwrite and organize my notes the way I wanted it. This takes away all the notebooks, all the binders, all the pens and pencils and sharpeners and erasers that you use, while having everything saved digitally so that way you don't lose your material and easily have access to it when you want to log into somewhere else on another laptop or another computer or another iPad. Now let's get on to what I use. What I use is a iPad Air 3rd generation 256 gigabyte iPad right here, and a 1st generation Apple Pencil. Now if you want to skip this part, I'm going to just talk about a little bit of what iPads that I suggest that you should take in terms of price range as well as storage when it comes to writing notes. You can skip to the timestamp that I put down below. So I just want to give you a warning now. This isn't a sponsorship for Apple, even though I'm talking about iPads. But if Apple does want to sponsor me, I mean, like, you know, get at your boy, you know? I gotta pay off those medical school loans at some point or another. Anyways, so let's get to the iPad. So I'm going to go and look at the Apple website. I'm going to put it up here. So we have the Apple website. This is the US one, so you're going to see US prices. So I'm going to put the Canadian prices because I'm Canadian, so I want to reach out to my Canadians. Okay, we're going to compare the iPads. So let's look at iPad and let's hit compare. So the three options that you have, I mean, there is the iPad mini, which is the fourth option, but I wouldn't use the iPad mini because it's just too small to even use. And I don't even think you can use a pencil to it. Anyways, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that one. You have three options on the iPads. You have the iPad Pro, the iPad Air 3rd generation, which is what I have, and the iPad 7th generation. So in the case of note-taking specifically, iPad Air and iPad are strong enough for taking notes. That's that. There's no argument about it. The iPad Pro in itself is enough in terms of replacing a whole MacBook Pro. So if you're thinking of getting an iPad Pro, you got to think about the price range, because the iPad Pro, you can see here, starts at $1,000 US. At the iPad Air, you have it starting off at $500 US, and then the iPad 7th generation, you have it starting off at $329 minimum. So in terms of strength, you probably want to just look at the iPad Air and iPad 7th generation. The iPad Pro, like I said, is more like a replacement for a laptop because it can do way more than just note-taking. You can do a whole lot of other things because it has a stronger chip in it. You can see that's also a bigger size. Between the iPad Air and the iPad, there's not much big difference in terms of size of the screen, as well as the chip is just a little bit stronger in the iPad Air. The only reason why I lean towards the iPad Air is because of the capability of getting a 256 gigabyte storage, and that is important. The idea here is that the iPad, you can only get, I think, 32 gigabytes and 128 gigabytes. And you can see the price range here, starting off $329 for the iPad and 128 gigabytes for $429 for the iPad 7th generation. The iPad Air 3rd generation, you can see it goes for a cost of $499 for the 64 gigabytes, and for the 256 it's $650. And then you can go and you can see on the iPad Pro, it goes from 128 gigabytes all the way to 1 terabyte, and you can see the price range is practically the same cost as a baseline MacBook Pro. Another big difference is that you can get a Magic Keyboard, which only works for the iPad Pro, and the 2nd generation Apple Pencil, whereas the 1st generation Apple Pencil will work for the iPad Air and the iPad 7th generation. Other than that, in terms of pricing, what I recommend is you should get something that leans towards 128 gigabytes to 256 gigabytes. I wouldn't go any lower than that, because let's say, for example, if you're only using it for notes and you're taking notes, PDFs, and you stack it and you take a ton of notes and you store it on OneNote, you store it in your files, you store it in your OneDrive, those are all going to take space on your iPad. But let's say, for example, you also wanted to put videos of lectures and you want to save on the iPad, that will also take some space. So to be in the safe side of everything, you would probably want to sit at minimum of 128 gigabytes, and then you can go up from there, up to you. For me, 256 gigabytes, I had no problems. I have a ton of storage. I think I only use 90 gigabytes of it right now, and I'm already 2 years into med school, and I have videos saved on it. I have lecture slides saved. I have a ton of things saved, PDFs of textbooks. I have a ton of things saved on my iPad. Now let's get to the apps that I use. The apps that I use, as I mentioned earlier, is OneDrive, which is a cloud-based drive, and OneNote. And the reason why I use these apps is because they come free with my school. One thing is, you should check and see if your school gives you access to a cloud drive. So good examples of cloud drives would be Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, iCloud. See if your school gives you access to cloud drives. My school gives me 1 terabyte with OneDrive, so I stuck to OneDrive. In terms of my note-taking app, I use OneNote. And the reason why I use OneNote is because it comes free with my school. As I said, OneNote, OneDrive, and all of Office comes free with my school. Free with my tuition. And I started off with it, so I didn't really change. I knew that there were other apps out there like Notability, GoodNotes. I'm blanking out on the rest of them, but those are the three that amongst my colleagues, my friends, is what we used. GoodNotes and Notability both have their perks and their downfalls, and I'll probably make a video comparing the three. If you really wanted the video, you can comment down below. But I do know that GoodNote and Notability have a cost of $10 that you gotta pay for the app. I think it's a one-time payment, and then you can use that app on the laptop as well as on the iPad. So now let's get to the meat of the video. So how I use my iPad. So just a warning, this is how I use my iPad for my program. Your program may be different, and you may have different things that you need to organize that I may not be using. There's a lot of things on OneNote specifically that you can do that I don't use necessarily, but you can see what I'm doing and how I take my notes. And if you like the way I do it, you can copy the way I do it, but if you can also do things the way you want to do it. Now when we look at the iPad, we can see I have OneNote opened up. And one thing I like about OneNote is that it has good sectioning. You can start off here on the far left, and you can see that I have different notebooks, and these notebooks can be split into different subjects. If you're doing undergrad and you have different subjects, for me in my school I have different terms, so I have everything organized in different terms. So what we'll look at here is I have term 3, 4, I have term 3, I have term 4, 4B. I have like weird names for everything. It works for me. Whatever works for you, you can name whatever you want. For me, this is what works. So these are the notebooks. Term 4, 4B is what we'll look at. When you open up notebooks, you can have sections. In these sections, you can have, let's say, for example, chapters of certain things that you're being taught. So let's say, for example, you're doing biochem and you're learning chapter 1. So you can do chapter 1 as one section, and then you can have pages within those sections. So here what I have is I have a split into weeks. My school is organized by weeks. Our lectures are organized by weeks. So for me, on the middle side, you can see week 1, which is all the week 1 lectures that I have, week 1 DLAs, which are the directed learning activities that we have, which are self-taught lectures. So those are what we have for week 1, and then I have week 2 DLAs, week 3, week 4, and then I have things where I have my notes condensed, and so I have all my path notes condensed in one section. I have all my micro notes condensed in one section, and I have all my drug notes condensed in one section. I also have a slide where I have all my practice questions, and here I can use the iPad to highlight or annotate some of the questions, so that way I can work through the questions and figure out what the answers are. And that's one thing I like about this iPad, is that I can use that to like annotate everything, and then later on I can erase it and then go back and do those questions again later on. So now let's look at week 2, and let's look at a lecture and how I take my notes during lecture time. So we can close this up on this corner, and we can see this is one of the lectures. So inflammation and repair. So looking at inflammation and repair, we have the lecture. This lecture is taught in the class, and I'm sitting in class right now and I am writing my notes. So the first thing that I do is I open up a free slide like this, and I hit page, and it opens up like this. It's empty, it has no title, and the first thing I do is I type in the title. The next thing I do is I add the PDF. So I can go into insert, and then I hit PDF, and then I go into my OneDrive. You can look at the locations and you can see where my notes are. So you have access always to iCloud Drive, because the iPad always has access to iCloud Drive. And then if you wanted to use any other drives, you would have to download it, and then you would connect your iPad to that. And then you can connect OneNote to whatever drive you're using. And then you can, this is the same case for Notability, this is the same case for GoodNote. I have all my lecture slides uploaded onto my OneDrive from our school website, and then I click OneDrive, and then I click Files, and I pick the slide that I want. After that, everything should come up, and when it comes up, it should be blank like this, but then it would have just a lecture like this. At that point, I would go into View, and it would normally come out like this, empty. So what I like to do is I like to put lines, because it gives me better organization of how I write my notes. So here we have lines now next to the lecture slide, and at this point I began to write my notes. So from here you're going through Okay, so at this point we have our lectures talking about granulomas and everything that comes with granulomas, and you can see here I annotated on the side. You can see I am going down, I'm annotating more and more important things. I condense them a little bit. Maybe I highlight them, I organize them like this. You don't have to necessarily go like that. Some of my notes are just circles, little words here and there. But for me, like, I like to organize it so that way I can later on drag it and drop it or copy it to my condensed notes, and I can hit copy, and then I can move it into my condensed note lecture slide. So let me show you just some more features. Let's go into one of my condensed slides. So let's go to one of my micro ones. So this one is skin and bone infection. So you can see here, this one was from March 17, 2020, skin and bone infections. So I have my notes here organized like this. So you can see that I have different color coordination for everything. So here I don't know if you can read my notes. I mean, my handwriting's, for me it's okay, but for you guys maybe bad or good, who knows. But to me this is good, and everything is condensed. So these are talking about specific infections, their causes, their presentations, their conditions, their sources, how to diagnose. And then I have them organized by different colors, so that way you can see each one is a different infection that I am talking about, and it's condensed. And the one thing I like about using the iPad is that, let's say for example I write something and I forgot an infection, I can easily select one of them, and then I can move it around and organize it to put it here, I can put it there. I mean, you can do whatever you want in terms of that. So I have my things condensed. This is all the headliners right there, the green, which is epidermis. We have we can see hair follicles, we can see here dermis, and they're all split into different things. And these are all the types of infections and everything. So this is how I use my notes. You can see here I even copy and pasted a slide. I highlighted some important features, and then I wrote notes next to it, so that way I know what is important. And this is how I use my iPad basically. At this point, once I went into lecture, I annotate it, and then I go home and then I start to condense my notes. I rewrite them, reorganize them in the way that I see fit, the way I think it helps me best, and color coordinate it, highlight the important features, and then read through it again, and then do practice questions. At that point, I feel comfortable with the material. The things that I don't know when it comes to, once I do the practice questions and I don't know the material, I can go back, I can see that slide, I can try and remember it, read it through, maybe I can annotate it, maybe I can add more to it, I can go to the lectures, I can see what's missing, I can go to outside sources, I can go to the lecture videos or audios and see what's missing. At that point, everything is condensed and here for me. So another thing that's important with this is that I have everything condensed on my iPad. With med school, we have a big exam after second year or third year, depending on your school, and that's the step 1. And for me, I condense these notes so that way I can use them later on for my step 1. I know that there are other sources that you can use, and which I use multiple different things like Anki and Boards and Beyond and Pathoma and all those kinds of videos. But with my notes condensed, I have something that I made myself that's reorganized that can help me get better in terms of getting good marks. I feel like I rambled on and on and on and spit knowledge at you guys, but this is how I use my iPad, and I gave you the reasons why I use them and the cost of the iPad itself. I think the biggest limiting factor is the cost for most students, but I think it is also a good investment because this comes down to your education. And if you do believe that handwriting is something that you use majority of the time when you're studying, an iPad would be something you should consider, because the iPad is a easier way to carry around all the information that you need without breaking your back or buying binders and notebooks or pencils and pens and all kinds of stuff. All you need is one pencil where you can change the colors of the way you write, the way you highlight, the way you erase, and an iPad where you can write and save and put everything online and store. So that is my recommendation. Those are my recommendations, and that's my advice. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to subscribe, like, comment, and I will be coming out with more videos in the future, so feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much. See ya.